Hello and welcome back to another video. And I was looking through my videos and I had one that talked about the most underrated Paul McCartney solo album that he had done in his career. And that was Pipes of Peace. But then I started looking at the rest of the career and I thought about, in Wings, there's also an album that is really just overlooked and gets a bad reputation for absolutely no reason. And that one, which I'm sure you looked in the title, whichever direction it is for you, is in fact Back to the Egg. Now, this is the final Wings album that they put out in 1979, and it's when they decided to go with a different direction, more or less. I mean, up to this point, they have been typical, 70s rock and roll. They started off kind of being experimental, then they went into a little more mainstream, and then the one prior to this, London Town, had some songs that might have played into some older themes, like Name and Address, stuff like that. Even Famous Groupies. There's some weirder songs in London Town. But this one, they kind of embraced the upcoming punk rock scene in a way. They kind of went edgier. Songs like Spin It On, Old Siam Sir, not as much, but still a little bit, Arrow Through Me. And then on the other side, the side two, which is called the Over Easy side, you had even the Rockestra theme, which in and of itself, it's a good song. It's not necessarily anything crazy to write home about until you know who played on that song. Now, the bass band on this record, you have Paul, you have Linda, and you have Denny, the main three. And then you also have Steve Holley and Lawrence Juber. Now, this is the only time that I know of either of those two being in the band. Because let's go back to London Town. This one had Joe English and Jimmy McCulloch, I believe that's how you say his name, as the other two members of Wings. They didn't even get their faces on the album. Both sides, it's literally just the main three. I say main three because it's really always been Paul, Linda, and Denny throughout the whole span of the Wings career. So when I was talking about the Rocket's theme, on side two, which is called the Over Easy side, as I said, side one's called the Sunny Side Up side. Let's get this out of here, and we'll take a look. When you look at the inner sleeve, this is the artwork on this side, and when you flip it over, you get the egg. Yes, there is in fact an egg on the record, and let's pull it on out of here nice and carefully. And on this side, you have also the egg, and this side it's also back to the egg again. So you have a double-sided egg. This side is definitely sunny side up, and this one is over easy. You can see that they're actually different pictures, different eggs cooked differently, which I find hilarious. Now then, I dropped the list of people who were on there, but let's read it off to you. All right, jump cut because I had to pick it up. So it says sides two, tracks 1 and 6. Yeah, 6. 6. Which is So Glad to See You Here, which is one of my favorite songs on this album. You had the Rockestra lineup. It's a pretty big lineup. So on guitar, you had Denny Laine, obviously. You had Lawrence Juber, so that's where that's what he did on this thing. You had a guy named Hank Marvin, which unfortunately, I'm not familiar with who that is, so if that's somebody that I don't know, let me know. And then you had David Gilmour from Pink Floyd playing guitar. And then, after all that, you had Pete Townshend, too. That's quite a lineup, and that's just guitars. So now, we're going on to drums. You had Steve Holley, which is part of Wings, and then you had John Bonham, of all people, playing drums. And then you're like, okay. And then, yeah, you also had Kenny Jones. I'm, once again, not familiar who that is. We go on to the bass players, and you had a few bass players. You, of course, had Paul McCartney, obviously. You had Ronnie Lane, Bruce Thomas. Don't know who they are, unfortunately. And then you had John Paul Jones. So you have half of Led Zeppelin. You have Pete Townshend. You have Dave Gilmour. And then Wings. This is one of the biggest supergroups, until you get to like Ringo's All-Star Band, which now encompasses all kinds of people. But at the time, this is crazy. Then keyboards, you have Linda, Tony Ashton, I'm not familiar who that is. Percussion, Speedy, I don't know how to say it, Acquay, Tony Carr, Ray Cooper, Morris Pert, and then the horn section, there's a list of horn players. Yeah. It's quite the Rockestra band was quite a large band. Now, So Glad to See You Here is probably the better of the two songs. The Rockestra theme is just kind of basic in my mind. Um, Side one has honestly the entirety of side one. You have the reception, which is kind of like an opening, like the beginning of Sergeant Pepper. You hear noises and stuff like that, and then getting closer, um, it kind of just bursts out into a ball of energy. We're Open Tonight is also, it kind of slows it down a little bit, but it's still, to me, it's a very good like it kind of like takes the energy and kind of does one of these numbers because it does come back up towards the end. Spin It On is about as high energy as any Wings song ever was going to be. It's really them getting as hard rock as they ever were going to. Again and again and again and again was the next song. Then one of my other favorites on here is number 6, Old Siam Sir. It's really just kind of a nonsense Paul track, but at the same time, it's so catchy that I go back and I play that one. I keep going back through 3 songs on this: Old Siam Sir, Arrow Through Me, which is the next song, and then on side B, So Glad to See You Here. So there are some songs that I've kind of in my mind, they've kind of just like faded away. I don't remember as well like the song To You. After the Ball is kind of more of his ballady piano sort of deal. Winter Rose, and then The Broadcast. And then we get into So Glad to See You Here. But it's such like an underappreciated album. It was a direction that honestly, if Wings had stayed together, I wonder if they would have went with it, because immediately after this, when Paul went back to being solo, just regular old Paul, when he did Tug of War, Pipes of Peace, he dropped it all. And you could say, well, what about McCartney 2? McCartney 2 was never really intended to be an album. It was kind of just, he was experimenting with stuff, recorded things, and he put it out. So that one doesn't really count. The next step beyond Back to the Egg really was Tug of War and Pipes of Peace, which, as I mentioned in the last video, they really were part of a double album. Here's McCartney 2. Too many albums. So Tug of War, Pipes of Peace, it really kind of dropped it. In fact, let me see. On here, Tug of War wasn't very edgy. Take It Away Now. Here Today, Ballroom Dancing, that's a fun song, even if it is a little out there. Pound is Sinking. Yeah, he kind of really just lost the edginess, which is fine. He went back to being more him, maybe to his own detriment. It's hard to say, but if you haven't given Back to the Egg the chance that it really deserves, it is a great album. If I had to compare it, like say which one is better, London Town or Back to the Egg, I think Back to the Egg is better. London Town has a lot of good stuff on it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like run-of-the-mill Wings. You get Back to the Egg, and you're like, oh, this is a little different. Okay, I see what they're going with. And then you have such a massive band playing the Rockestra side that, honestly, I didn't even know that Led Zeppelin was involved, at least half of them. I learned that as I was looking at the paperwork. I mean, I knew Dave Gilmour was in it, but he was the only one I really knew that was in it. So I surprised myself setting up for this video. So give it a listen. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.